What will you do for tillage this spring, and how will you fix any ruts that you may have created in your fields last fall?
Well, there's no question ruts were created in many fields last fall, and here's where I'd like to start. When you think about that, let's just say you've got a rut that's 18 inches deep, and you come across the top with a field finisher, something like that, and you fill that rut in. You know, you can look across the field and say, well, man, my field looks perfect, everything's level. I'm gonna have a nice even seed bed as I'm seeding my crop this year. And while that may be true, still deep down underneath the soil, 12 inches down or 18 inches down where the bottom of that rut is, you've got this hard compacted layer that's not going to go away. Many people are under the assumption that, well, there's a freeze-thaw effect, over a few years that'll disappear. If you're thinking about that, just go digging where you left some ruts 4 or 5 years ago. My bet is they're still going to look exactly the same once you get down to the bottom of them. They're not going away with freeze-thaw. We've got to address them with some tillage if we want those ruts to disappear for the long term.
Okay, but here's the whole problem. In the spring, well, it's just like today, this ground is sopping wet. Okay, how am I going to fix it when it's wet? I can't. And by the time the top 3 inches gets fit, and I want to go out there and plant my corn, can I really do tillage down to 18 inches? Not a chance. Okay, yes, in some areas of the country, in some soil types, and in some years, you might be able to do some deeper tillage and try to address some of these ruts that you've created. But in a lot of cases, we are just doing the Band-Aid approach, and well, I guess let's just make the best of it for this year. What am I going to do? Some vertical tillage on the top, try to dry the soil out a little bit, try to fracture the soil down a little bit deeper just with the vertical tillage. I can certainly try that. Otherwise, like in our own operation, we might just cover it up for a while with a field cultivator, and then we'll try to address it this fall. Now, another thing that a lot of people are doing today is using cover crops to try to address these ruts.
Well, you certainly could use a deep-rooted crop, and maybe you're talking about radishes or something that's going to have that deep root system to try and penetrate through that hard soil and break it up. So if you say, well, I'm seeding a cover crop anyway on that ground, well, make sure you incorporate something in there that's going to do something towards compaction. You can look through a lot of different resources. I know on agphd.com under the resources tab, we have a list of different cover crops with some of the benefits of each one, including breaking up deep compaction. But the other thing I'm kind of surprised you didn't say right away, Brian, was improve your drainage.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of these problems are just caused because we're out there in the fall when we shouldn't be. Well, how do you reduce that field from being wet? There are absolutely some things you can look at. How about the compaction in the first place? Maybe if we had less compaction, we could get the moisture to go through. Maybe you need to add more calcium to your soil. That makes your soil a little bit more porous and can allow water to drain a little more easily. Obviously, if we can address things with tile. Now, I would say a lot of people talk about, well, let's just improve surface drainage. That really doesn't help a whole lot. It might help a little bit, but that's not lowering the water table in your ground, and that's really what we're after. So I'd look at the other things before I looked at surface drainage, but you know, certainly you can do some surface drainage too. More than anything with that surface drainage, I worry about soil erosion and some other problems we could create. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you don't create the ruts if you're not out there when it's wet.
The big thing for me is a lot of these things that look like, well, it's just a one-day problem. Well, now that creates problems for many years down the road, and that's really what it comes down to in your soils. Your soils are a living, breathing thing, and when we mess stuff up out there, whether it's physically or chemically out in the soil, it's going to take quite a while to get things back to where they once were.
One of the other things you've got to consider if you want your ground to be great is controlling weeds like our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up later in the show.